black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know. And I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage, all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
See ya!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great one planned for you tonight. We'll be talking to Brent Thomas from the Paranormal Portal. And this is a show I'm becoming a fan of. It's on YouTube. Just type in the Paranormal Portal. And Brent does a great job with it. Every night at 7 p.m. he goes live. That's Pacific Standard Time. But if you get a chance, check it out. It's a very cool show. And I was talking to Brent off the air, and I said, hey, man, would you be willing to come on my show and just share some of the weird things that happened to you? It doesn't have to be Bigfoot related. It could be anything. And he said, yeah, I'd love to. And so we have him here tonight, and I can't wait to chat with him about some of his different encounters. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Let's jump into it tonight. Brent, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, man, this is a huge honor for me. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being here. It's an honor to have you on, man. I'm a huge fan of your show. I try and jump in there. If people go in, check out the Paranormal Portal, you'll probably catch me in chat. Very, very cool show. So thank you again for coming on. What made you start that show?
You know, honest to God, my whole life, and this may be a little drawn out, so bear with me, but my whole life I've always been into the paranormal. It's like I've always been enthusiastic about the idea that, you know, we haven't got everything figured out. There's a lot of things in this world that still can be discovered. There's still mystery. There's still secrets. There's still things out there. And you know, it's just the idea that the world still has layers that we haven't even come to understand yet. So for me, it's always been a lifelong passion. And honestly, I never really thought about doing a show, but I befriended a man, and we're still great friends to this day, by the name of Chris Geo, and he has the Truth Frequency Radio Network. And I had been listening to Sasquatch Chronicles forever. And honest to God, I would sit at my job, and I worked in marketing at the time, and I'd sit and with the earbuds in and just go through all of your episodes. And I was just a huge fan, and still am, of course. But I always really respected the way you did the show. It was the first time that I'd ever heard interviews where the interviewees get to talk. Yeah. You know, you let people talk, you let people express themselves and share their ideas, and you're not stomping on people. And I always thought that was really cool, because it's like sitting around a fire, a campfire, and just sharing ideas and sharing stories. And so like I said, I was always a big fan, but in getting to know Chris, I was like, all of a sudden it just occurred to me, wait, I'd like to do a show too. And so, and it was funny because the show, for some reason, it was already like it was preformed in my head somewhere that I didn't realize. So I sat down with him and started talking. I came up with the name Paranormal Portal. I came up with the idea and what I wanted to do with it, just all on the fly. And he's like, cool, let's do it. And so we started doing it. And it's just been an amazing adventure ever since.
Yeah, and most people don't realize I used to do live shows, and night after night after night, there's a lot of work that goes into those shows. And I don't think most people catch on to that, you know, how much work and effort actually goes into not only putting on a good show, or not only putting on a show, but putting on a good show night after night after night. You know, and you're so open to, you know, people come on and be like, say the craziest thing, and you're like, go on. And I think, man, what has this guy seen and what has this guy experienced? Because you don't flinch one bit at the weird stuff, you know. And tell me about growing up in the haunted home. I'd love to hear about this.
Well, it wasn't I didn't grow up in it. I was already an adult, and I owned a home in Minnesota, in southern Minnesota, right on the Mississippi River. And it was built in 1894. It was old Queen Anne Victorian. It was a beautiful home. And I loved it a bunch, but I still have it to this day. But, you know, life happens. And it was a house that required a lot of tender love and care. And I'm not really a to-do-it-yourself kind of guy. So I did let it go. But it was just there was experiences there that would happen. And the weird thing is there was more activity certain times of the year. Like it would be just about dormant for 6 months out of the year. And then I would get into a period of a couple months where things would start picking up, like furniture creaking when nobody's on it, and doors closing by themselves. And then there was this time I was walking through my dining room, and I didn't have a dining room table at the time. Now I would like to say that none of this really freaked me out, and I don't understand why. I feel like I probably should have been freaked out and probably should still be when I experience weirdness, but for some reason it doesn't. And I'd love to say this because I have nerves of steel, but I just think I got a disconnect somewhere in my head. But I was going through the dining room, and I had this weird feeling like I had to turn around. And so I was just going to go out the door too. So I had my hand on the door, and I turned around back towards the dining room. And as I turned around, the chandelier pulled out of the ceiling and smashed into the floor. Wow. I was like, no. And honest to God, where I should have been like, oh my God, I'm out of here. Honest to God, my thought at the time was, oh God, now I got to fix that too.
It's crazy.
It's creepy.
Well,
yeah.
Was there
and
anything
there was other
violent? I mean, anything violent that went on in that home?
Not
besides chandeliers being ripped out.
Not to me so much, but I'll tell you, for some reason, my cousin, the house didn't like him much. And I don't know why. And maybe that's why nothing ever happened to me. It was more like just a presence to me. But I was going through a tough time years and years ago, and he came out from Michigan to stay with me. And I'd never had an experience in that house where it was really targeting someone before. But his bed would shake at night. And so he started out sleeping in the other bedroom from me back in the back of the house. And I woke up one morning, he's on the couch, and I'm like, what's going on? You could have slept in the bedroom. He goes, yeah, I tried that, except the bed started shaking, so I came out here. And then he was helping me bring stuff down to the basement. We'd been up and down the basement stairs dozens and dozens of times, up and down. And suddenly, all of a sudden, he screams in pain, and I'm running over there. I find him on the stair, sitting there with his foot down on the stair. And he's like, man, you got to help me. I'm like, what's going on? And I noticed this pool of blood forming under his foot. And he's like, I stepped on something sharp. And so I lifted up his foot, and it ended up there was a razor knife, one of those break-off kind, was sitting in the stair, pointed straight up. And it hadn't been there this whole time. And suddenly it was there, and just in time for him to step right on it and put it into his foot.
Jeez, man. That's crazy.
It is, right?
Did you ever see an apparition or voices or anything like that in the home?
I did sometimes hear what I thought was mumbling, but it was a house that was in the town area. So it wasn't like I was out in the rural area where everything's quiet. So I just attributed to could be someone outside, could be, there's all kinds of ambient noise, and it's not a huge metropolis. It's actually kind of a small town, but it still wasn't for sure that I was hearing, voices. But I thought on a few occasions that I was, but I never really saw an apparition until one night. I'm going to get all personal here, but it's just the way I roll. But I was having an argument one night with an ex of mine that was living with me at the time. And I was just like, you know what, whatever. And I decided, well, I'm going to go sleep on the couch. So, because she continued to want to discuss it, and I was just like all done. So I went out on the couch and I kind of just laid out there and started nodding off. And it was probably about a half hour or so. And suddenly I saw what I thought was my girlfriend walking through the living room and passing me and going to the kitchen. And so I ignored it for a while because, I wasn't talking to her at the time. And I suddenly realized no lights came on. Like, well, what is she doing? Is she just standing in there in the dark? So then I got up and looked in the kitchen and nobody was there. I'm like, what the hell's going on? So then I go out of the kitchen, go back to the bedroom, and she was fast asleep. It was not her.
One thing I wanted to ask you, because, you're into this more than I am and you know more about it than I do. Did you ever find out, sometimes with hauntings or paranormal experiences like that, it's always a person that lived 100 years ago in the home, or not always, but you know what I mean? Sometimes there's some sort of correlation. Did you ever find out about the spirit that was there?
I never really did, but I assumed, I did catch that apparition, and I can tell you it was a woman. But I all I know about the history of the house is it was built by a wealthy family for their two spinster daughters. And they lived out the remainder of their years there until they eventually passed. And so I just think they liked it and stuck around,
Yeah, Zach, did this experience kind of get you into, I know you do, I don't know if you do it, Brent, I hear you talking about on your show a lot, ghost hunting, that sort of thing. Did you ever go and do a ghost hunt? I don't know if I'm using the right verbiage or not, but you know what I mean? Like, go do an investigation, I guess is better than saying ghost hunt, but you know what I mean?
Right. No, I've not done any traditional investigations where you go to a haunted place, set up cameras, set up a nerve center, and go out and try to get EVPs and that kind of stuff. But I have gone to several houses to cleanse them, to try to get rid of problem things over the years. But I don't do it a bunch, and quite honestly, I don't know. That's something that I definitely want to do as a direction for the Paranormal Portal. I want to do some, on-camera investigations and do some footage, and just to expand what the show has to offer. But it's definitely on my bucket list, but it's not something I've done a bunch of up until this point.
What kind of a process is involved in cleansing a home? I mean, kind of what do you do when, let's say, someone has a poltergeist in their home?
Oh, well.
Because I actually get asked this, believe it or not. A lot of people contact me about demon stuff, and I'm just like, I don't know, Godspeed, I wish you the best. I really don't know what to say to them. And so I'm kind of curious on what that process looks like.
Well, in a nutshell, hauntings can be because of many different things. Like sometimes, an entity or spirit will be introduced to a place just because someone loves to go antique shop, and then they manage to bring something home that has an attachment. So all of a sudden the dishes are moving and, chairs are sliding around and they're not quite sure what's happened. So, sometimes it's just as simple as helping people retrace their steps and figure out if they brought something new into the house at about the same time the activity started. Other times it can be, sometimes they're just there, they're just present, and in those cases they may be dormant or just kind of not active, but suddenly someone will decide to renovate and remodel, and God, that can really knock up the activity quick, because a lot of times these spirits were like once people, and the only thing that's really changed is that they just are they're physically challenged.
Yeah, kind of in limbo. Yeah.
Yeah. So like the only thing that's changed is they don't have a body, but they still consider it their home in a lot of cases. And they still consider that, things should be the way they left them. And they may not like your wallpaper, or they may not like that, that wall being taken out. And so, they may rage. Sometimes they can be, just truly dark and demonic attachments. Now, in many cases, it has a lot to do with the person's faith. And I don't mean necessarily just Christian faith. I just mean whatever they believe in is what is going to resonate the most strongly for them to get something out of their house. So, in other words, if somebody's an atheist picking up a Bible and starting to spout verses, probably isn't going to do them a whole lot of good because they don't have any faith in it. They don't really believe that, and it's not going to be powerful because, in my opinion, and this is just me, but I think, faith is, the power of faith comes from the faith of the believer. It's how you resonate your energy into those symbols or into those ideas, and that's what makes them powerful. And so a lot of times you have to align what you're doing with the spirituality of the people living there. But oftentimes it can have, you can include holy water and Bible verses and hanging religious insignias and stuff around the house that resonate to that faith. Other times could just be sage, could be crystals, could be Tibetan singing bowls, could be frankincense, and drawing cleansing the house and then drawing a perimeter of salt around the foundation of the outside to keep it as a barrier. There's ideas that olive oil across the thresholds of doors and stuff will keep evil out. Native American beliefs are like cedar boughs hung over the doors will keep evil out and will keep evil from staying. And so things like that. But the idea is basically you just want to change the energy of the house. You want to change it so that it's charged towards the positive, and that may push it out. Now, there's two different types of hauntings, and one of which is called an intelligent haunt and one of which is called a residual haunt. And basically a residual haunt is like something happened at some point and it left like for lack of a better term, like a psychic impression on the place. And so every once in a while, the weird activities will repeat. Like, every Thursday at 2 a.m., you can hear somebody walking up in the attic, and it doesn't make any sense that somebody's up in the attic. But it may be a residual thing that had happened, or some emotional event that happened to a person that was living there that left some kind of event that will just replay like a tape recorder. Now, an intelligent haunting will be directed and interacting in some level with the people that are present. So in other words, one person always has things happening to them, and it doesn't seem to have other people. So it's very intelligently targeting one person. Or, if you say something, you'll get this real, response like, get out of my house, and all of a sudden something smashes. It's like that's a very intelligent reaction because something understood what was said and reacted to it. And so there's not any, as a friend of mine, Sean, who's a psychic, says, there's no one size fits all for this kind of stuff, but you just have to try to play it towards the person's belief and things that are powerful to them. Because ultimately, when somebody goes into a house to clear it, it's going to be fine for a while, but if the people inside don't resonate to that, it's, going to come back or something else is going to replace it.
I gotcha. It makes sense. Not really. There's not really a quick answer to. It depends on the situation. I get what you're saying. That actually makes a lot of sense. One time I was telling on your show in your chat room, there's a guy he's a I don't know. Is ghost hunter an appropriate term, or ghost investigator?
Paranormal investigator, but there are ghost hunters too. That's just the amount of technique involved is what changes the meaning.
I gotcha. Well, paranormal investigator, and he was out in Texas, and he was in this area where it was, there was a lot of bad things that happened, and according to him, he could hear people screaming at night in the woods. It used to be an old town; it's abandoned now. You can hear a saw going and people screaming. And I had never heard any of that. And he was talking about this EVP thing, where you ask, I guess, the spirits a question, they answer it, and somehow it comes through their voice in the box. Mm-hmm. I have no clue what I'm talking about, as you can see. And I was just being a wise ass, and I said, well, ask him if there's any Bigfoot around. And so he did, and it came back and answered him. And the answer was, yes, they're very destructive. And it was creepy. I mean, I was creeped out when I heard it. It's strange when you really start looking into spirits and demons. I don't know why they creep me out, but they do. Mm-hmm. What's the strangest encounter you've heard as far as a spirit encounter, a ghost or a demon? What's the strangest one you've ever heard?
Well, that's a good question. God, there's hundreds of them going through my head. I think any of them that involve children to me are the hardest, There's stories of you often hear these, and I can't really paraphrase one story for you, but I can tell you that the ones that are hardest for me to wrap my head around and to deal with are the ones that involve children, because I don't understand that. That one just seems hard for me to swallow. And we'll get stories, and I've heard of stories. Both we've received them on the show, and I've heard them where people are like, we had this activity in the house, and it was really bizarre. We couldn't make heads or tails of it. And then somebody saw the apparition of a little child. And, to me, that's so tough because I don't know. I do have a faith in the afterlife. I have a real strong spirituality. And here's where I get stuck on this. And I realize I'm probably not answering your question, but I'm answering it in a manner of speaking, because this is what's the most disturbing to me is if there is good and right in the universe, and I believe there is. I think there is. I think there's, whatever you want to call it is up to you, and it's up to your paradigm. But if there's something right and good, then when a child falls for whatever reason, that someone would bring the child home. It's hard for me to think that they would just be left to wander and figure things out. Now, I will say, though, as an addendum to that I think oftentimes dark things masquerade as children. And the reason why is that, for anything that is a predator, it uses a method of predation that causes the least amount of resistance. And so for, things like demons and other nefarious entities appearing like a child, any normal person, any normal adult is just almost biologically programmed to want to help a child. You just open right up. It's like, oh my God, and so it often starts with, oh, we have this little girl spirit and I just want to help it. And I leave it gifts and you're opening yourself up to it. And then, a little while later, the scratching and the screaming starts, it's like, then things go sideways and it's not a little girl at all. And it's something, 8 feet tall and twisted.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you about that, your take like on the black-eyed kids. And I've actually had a lot of those reports off the air, and it just sounds like demons presenting themselves as kids. What's your take on, and would you explain for the audience, the black-eyed children, what that is and kind of what people are seeing? And what is your take on it?
Okay. So the black-eyed kid phenomenon is basically this bizarre phenomenon. And here's the thing, just as a startup to that. Well, I guess I'll get to this at the end, but let me just say the black-eyed kids is this phenomenon where people will be in their homes or, in some places that they live, an apartment, a home. It doesn't seem to matter. And suddenly they'll get these weird knocks on their door late at night. And if they have the ability to look out before but they will see these little children, and the little children always have their heads hanging low, and like they have hoodies on, and their hoods are all pulled up, and they're just kind of looking towards the ground like they're downtrodden, and the kids are asking to come in because they need to use their phone to call their parents. Well, the people that experience this have this primal fear come over them, like for some reason they're absolutely terrified of these little children, and they don't know why, but they just know that they should not let them in. However, those same people feel a sense of compulsion that seems to emanate from these kids, almost like a form of mind control, where they feel like they're compelled to reach and open the door, and they'll oftentimes find their hand reaching for the door even without them thinking about opening the door, because they don't feel like they want to be anywhere near these things. And then eventually what happens is the kids look up, and where there should be normal eyeballs, they are just these jet black eyes. Even the sclera is all black. Everything is black. It's like these black pits. And, and these beings seem to be definitely supernatural, demonic, very, very well could be. I don't know if they're what it seems to me, and this is an idea I had a few years ago, but I've heard other people parrot this, and I'm not saying they got it from me, but apparently some other researchers have come to this conclusion too, that it seems to be a very, very old phenomena. And while the term black-eyed kids is pretty new, it's like from the 90s I think in Portland, Oregon is where the term came from, when a reporter was out in his car at a movie theater, but he was trying to pay his water bill or something, and he was sitting in his car writing out the check with the window cracked just a little bit, and two kids came up. Their faces were kind of shadowed under the hoods and stuff. One was about 11, the other one looked to be about 7 or 8, and said, "Hey, mister, will you give us a ride home?" And he said that immediately. He was gripped with fear, and I can't remember the gentleman's name right now, but he just knew he didn't want to do anything with these kids. He didn't want anything to do with them. It was just this base reaction, like no, 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 no. But he said that he caught himself reaching to wind the window down and then to open the door, and it took a lot of self-control not to do that. And apparently, as he kept refusing, they got more and more demanding, like, let us in now. You need to let us in. We need to ride home, and he finally drove away, but he's the one that coined the phrase black-eyed kids, because when they did look up, of course, their eyes were black. I think honestly, either there's some kind of, carryover from the whole Nosferatu legend, because they seem to need permission. Like they can't come in. They can't come in on their own. They seem to need permission to come in. And so that would definitely put them into almost a vampiric kind of thing. But, I don't know. It seems hard to wrap your head around the idea that there could be like these vampire things around, but I don't know. It's definitely a phenomenon that many, many people have experienced. And I guess either a demon or some kind of, whatever the Nosferatu legend is based off of, those could be the real things. I don't know.
What is that legend you're talking about? I'm not familiar with that.
Well, it's basically the vampire legends, the old legends from, Romania or wherever they may come from. And actually around the world, they've had these legends of these beings that could compel people and would drink of their life force. And, so basically the idea of what became known as Dracula, that he couldn't enter without permission, and things like he didn't have a reflection. And I don't know if the black-eyed kids have reflections or not, but people have allegedly observed them doing superhuman feats, like suddenly being on a balcony 3 stories off the ground, knocking on a sliding glass door, and in the next moment they're up on the roof looking at the person who's watching them across the way. So they seem to have some kind of supernatural abilities, whatever they are.
Yeah, I had a listener one time contact me, and she was talking about, she lived on a Native American reservation. She grew up on one. And I guess they had come to her door a couple times, and her mother, kind of an older, Native American woman, she was like, shut the door. She's like, don't interact with them. Don't look at them. Don't talk to them. And I'd asked the lady, I said, well, were they physical? Was it like a human being? And she said, yeah, they were very much physical, but they just had black eyes. And that sense you're talking about of fear seems to come over people. Have you ever heard of someone letting them in, and has anything bad ever happened? Seems like everyone I talk to has that fear and doesn't let them in.
Yeah, well, there's a couple stories that I've heard, and I can't verify them at all. They're just out there. But there's one that's kind of a heartbreaker, and this was a mother was going to a convenience store and left her 8-year-old kid in the back of the car, ran in, and when she came back out, like maybe 15 minutes later, there was another strange little boy in the back seat with them. And she said immediately when she saw this kid, she was gripped with fear and absolutely panicked and terrified. And then apparently the kid looked up at her, and she saw the black eyes. And in the next moment, he had just disappeared, was gone. And she said, how did he get in the car? How did he get in? And the little boy said, well, I thought it would be fun if he could come over and play, And then apparently this little boy got deathly sick. I don't know for sure if he passed away from this or if he just got really sick. But people have reported these really strange, like necrotic kind of infections taking over and, basically hanging on to life by just a limb. Some people allegedly pull through, others allegedly don't. But It's, it's out there as if, again, from the Nosferatu legend, if they were let in and they bit people, they would get sick, with the being struck by the infection from the bite. And so, again, I just find that really interesting that that's a correlation.
Yeah, it is. It's very interesting. And it's interesting, too, they present themselves as kids. I've had eyewitnesses on that have run into usually it's women, that run into some sort of female, usually an older woman, and has black eyes. And seems to roam around and doesn't really seem to be from here. So it's not only just the kids, but, there's a lot of encounters of people running into adults that see this all black eyes and someone just acting bizarre. You know what I mean? Very demonic-like.
Yeah, I've heard of a few stories like that. And one of them came out of New Orleans, of all places, and it was a court reporter. And allegedly, again, there's so many things out there, and I can't claim that they're fact or not, but I can tell you that there's an allegation out there that this is the case. But she was working in the court, and this attorney came in, and he was just all dressed to the nines, looked normal and stuff, and she found him just amazingly attractive, and she kept finding herself distracted just looking at the guy, like he was. She just felt compelled to take him in, and she felt so attracted that during a break in the court proceedings, she went down to, I guess, smoke outside, and she saw that the guy was out there outside of the door, but talking on his cell phone. After he hung up the phone, she was trying to flirt with him and, kind of coming on to him. And then apparently the guy had like no reaction at all, and she persisted, and then he finally looked up at her. He had normal eyes during the court proceedings, but then he looked up at her, and his eyes went jet black. And she said that her heart just sank, and she just felt terrified. And then, I don't know if that was the end of it or if he ever showed up again, but it was definitely, at the very least, it's almost got to be a possession of some kind.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I know that you cover many different topics, and when we come back from the break, I'd like to talk to you about the UFO that you saw, get a little bit into UFOs and aliens when we come back. Brackets, first round upsets, and the final four. March Madness is here, and it's time to bet with the best at MyBookie. There's only a few more weeks left of March Madness. Time to get in on the action. MyBookie has been in business for years, and they're growing like wildfire. The best part is they pay out fast. So when you call that 12/5 upset this year, make sure to celebrate. You'll be pocketing cold hard cash. Bet with the best, only at MyBookie. Try for yourself by visiting mybookie.ag today. And if you deposit now, MyBookie will give you a 50% sign-up bonus, up to a $1,000 bonus, just for entering the promo code Sasquatch. That's promo code Sasquatch. You play, you win, you get paid. Only at mybookie.ag. Thank you again to MyBookie. Let's bring Brent back on the show from the Paranormal Portal. If you get a chance, check it out on YouTube. The Paranormal Portal plays every night, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Brent, welcome back to the show. Before we went on break, I was asking you about the UFO that you saw. Would you mind telling us about that?
I'd love to tell it. And here's the thing now, full transparency. It sounds pretty convenient that a guy that hosts a paranormal show would have so many paranormal occurrences, but I swear on everything I love that this is true. These are all true that I'm telling you. But the story is I lived in Minnesota at the time, but worked remotely for a company. And that company ended up moving their headquarters out to the north of Idaho. And I happened to be traveling out here, which is where I live now. I live in this very area, but I happened to be traveling out here about 4.5 years ago. And rather than get me a hotel room or something to stay in while I was in town for business, the owner of the company said, we got this property out in the mountains, and it's about 25 minutes, 30 minutes away from any civilization, so to speak. So it's kind of remote. but it's up in the mountain valley. And he said, it's beautiful up there and you're welcome to stay there. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. That'd be fine. So I'm up at his cabin. It was after the full day of work, and it's not really a cabin. It was like a full blown house. It was just beautiful. But I'm up there at his house, and I'm the only one there because he didn't even live here yet. He and his wife were living at a different place while they were making the transition to move into this house. And I knew that he had these night vision binoculars. And so I was really excited because I love looking at the stars, and I have my whole life. I can't claim to know constellations, but I just think gazing at the heavens is really cool. And I'd long heard that most of the stars in our galaxy are actually red, so they're not visible with the naked eye. So I got the night vision goggles out, or they're actually binoculars, and I went out on the porch I'm out in the mountains. There's a bit of a moon, so it's not absolutely pitch black. But I'm out there on the porch looking up at the stars, and it was incredible. The star field was just so much different from any other time that I've seen it because the inclusion of all these new stars that I couldn't see was just amazing. And so I'm like a kid out there. I'm playing with these night vision binoculars and having a good time. And so I decided to, kind of look around the valley of the mountains that I was in, and I looked at the opposing hillside of the valley, and it was just really cool. I could see all the branches and the trees, and it was really amazing. And I'm panning around, and then I look on the side that I'm on, that the house is on, and he's got a switchback driveway. And so I'm using the night vision binoculars looking all the way down this pitch black driveway that I couldn't see because there's just so much trees and stuff that even the moonlight wasn't hitting in there. And I could see it plain as day, and I was having a good time. And then I panned up to the treetops, and about 30 feet above the treetops was the proverbial flying saucer. Now, it was about maybe 200 yards away from me, maybe 300, and it was just sitting there silently hovering above these treetops. And I was just so impressed because my whole life I've been absolutely, I absolutely believe that there's more life out there, and I believe that people who claim they've seen flying saucers, that there's something to that. I just had never seen anything my entire life. And so I was just thinking, well, somehow I've missed it, but I had an open mind for the possibility. Well, there it was right in front of me. And I was just amazed, and I was gazing at it for about 15 seconds through these binoculars. Then I was like, wait a minute, I want to see this with my own eyes. So I lowered the binoculars. And again, there's enough moonlight out that I could see. There was nothing there. I raised the binoculars. It's there. It's got the pulsating lights going around the whole periphery or the edges of it. And I take down the binoculars, and there's nothing there. I'm like, what in the hell's going on? I can see it. And then I realized, oh my God, it's somehow cloaked from our normal light spectrum. We can't see it. Maybe that's how these things are all over the place, and sometimes people catch glimpses of them, is because they have the ability to hide from us. And so I'm just sitting there, and I'm just beside myself. This is like, not only am I sure beyond a shadow of a doubt now that there are UFOs, but I'm seeing it. It's there, and I'm just beside myself. And then I'm watching it maybe a minute and a half, but then then the realization dawned on me. It's like, wait a minute, I'm looking at them, and they're just above that tree. But like, I'm probably the only thing going on in this whole valley, so they're probably sitting there looking at me. And so I was like, okay, I'm done now, because I didn't want to progress our relationship anymore at that point. So I went inside and shut the doors and locked them, and sat on the bed for several hours, just my head reeling.
Yeah, I don't want to end up like Travis Walton.
Yeah, exactly.
It's one thing you said there I find interesting, and I don't know very much about the UFO topic. I know probably enough to be dangerous, but you hear guys say that, like military guys, where it doesn't show up on radar, they don't see it with the naked eye, but then on a lot of these planes, they'll have infrared cameras, and they'll capture it. They'll capture it flying along with the jet, which makes you wonder if it's more of an interdimensional thing, more than physical. You know what I mean? I don't know if that.
Sure.
Maybe they're more physical. I don't know, but they appear to be physical. But it's weird what you're saying. With the binoculars, you could see it. Without them, you couldn't. That's strange, man. Were you scared looking at it? I mean, I realize it's 200-300 yards away, but that's still pretty close.
I mean, it was really close, and I think I was, I'm sure that I was more amazed than anything because it was there. I could see it and it was there. But I did get concerned when I thought, wait a minute, they sometimes take people. and I didn't feel like I needed any probing at that point, so I decided to go inside.
Yeah, decide to take off. Yeah, it's and it doesn't shock me that you've had these experiences. A lot of people who come on the show and they talk about their Sasquatch encounter. A lot of times they'll also talk about, off there, they'll be like, hey, I want to tell you this, but I don't really want to talk about it on the air. I also saw a ghost, or I also saw a UFO, or, so I think sometimes when you have an experience, I don't know if you're more sensitive to it, but it seems like someone who's had one experience usually will have 2 or 3 others they don't want to tell you about. Because it sounds kind of, you made that comment of like, oh, it's strange. I run the Paranormal Portal and I've had all these experiences, but it's not that strange, man. A lot of people usually have a Bigfoot encounter. Will tell you about a UFO encounter, or running into lights in the forest, or something else too as well. And I don't know if it's because we become more sensitive to stuff like that. I don't think it's luck. You know what I mean? Right.
It's like you almost become polarized for it or something like that. That suddenly, a veil is lifted and you can see more clearly now. And maybe it's just the acknowledgement that something's there helps us to, be more perceptive. Maybe it's something as simple as that, but you're right. It is almost a resonance, like all of a sudden, boom. Like, so for instance, I saw the UFO, and now I've seen never something that's close and profound, but I've seen other things that I'm pretty sure are UFOs as well. Now, I don't claim to know the full extent of our, quote unquote black projects and stuff. There's stories out there that, we can do amazing stuff with this, reverse engineered stuff. And I suppose that's possible. But all I can say is it is indeed UFOs. They're unidentified to me. So I can say, without a doubt. Now, the only thing that really clinched it for me was the fact that I couldn't see it with my naked eyes. And it was like, okay, this isn't something we made. This is well beyond what we're able to do as far as I know.
And the other incidences, were they lights? Is that what you saw? Is that what you're referring to?
So I've got some footage actually too, but and I use it on the middle break of the Paranormal Portal, the UFO break. Actually, it's the first one. There's some footage in that first break that I play, and I got the DoD footage on there that shows their stuff that they captured from their aircraft and stuff. But there's some green footage, night vision green, and that's what I recorded with my night vision binoculars, because I went and got a pair after I saw that UFO. I was like, no way, because I just occurred to me they could always be around, and so you can't see them without that night vision. So I got a pair. But I rigged it up with a GoPro and go outside, and the footage that's on that break of the night vision green footage was right outside my house here, standing on my back porch.
Really? I didn't know that. I remember watching that during your break.
Yeah.
And for the audience, when you watch the Paranormal Portal on YouTube, Brent will go to break about halfway through the show, but he'll play videos of, and I hate the ghost ones where that one lady gets possessed. She's like,
yeah.
There's a thing where something falls over in a store. She reaches over to pick it up, and then, but I didn't realize that footage. You have to send it to me. I'd love to post it up on the site.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I will for sure. I got some clips of it, but yeah, that footage is mine. And I keep hoping I'll get another, real up close and personal one. But, if they were watching me, maybe that's why I've seen more of them after that, because maybe somehow they tagged me and now they're like aware that I've seen them, and maybe they keep an eye on people that have observed them, because, like when you hear about things like abduction phenomena, it can go generations of people being abducted. And so obviously they're used to keeping tabs on people. Now, for the life of me, all that happened to me after I initially saw it was I went inside, sat on the bed for several hours going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I did eventually go to sleep. And as far as I know, that was the end of that story. But I've had people ask me, well, you sure that's all that happened?
Yeah.
Like, I hope so.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
No kidding. The only encounter I've ever heard where someone was abducted and it seemed like they were trying to help them. I interviewed Travis Walton, the Fire in the Sky, And that was an amazing, I mean, just to talk to him off the air was amazing. Even though the UFO seemed to hit him with some sort of weapon, what was strange is if you listen to him tell it, it almost seems like they were trying to help him or like fix it. And rarely do you get that in a lot of abduction stories. It seems like you're taken against your will, and they do whatever they want to do and then dump you off like the trash. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's happened. You know, in England, this guy was missing. It was just taken and missing, and then the police were looking for him. Everybody's looking for him. Nobody could find him. And then, like a week later, his corpse turned up on this pile of like garbage or refuse, and he had these weird burn marks on him, but he just appeared out of nowhere.
Yeah, I was just reading one. I was going to post it. It was about, and you probably know more about this than I do, but it was about this scoutmaster in the 50s. Have you ever heard that account?
I don't think so.
He was with, I'm going to post it to the blog, but he was with a bunch of Boy Scouts, and he pulls over, and they see this light, and he tells the boys to wait in the car. He's going to check it out. He thinks it's the plane coming down. And so when he goes out there to check it out, I probably should have read the story before I ran my mouth. But anyway, he ended up with burn marks. His skin was on fire. He was really in bad shape, but he was just looking up at the craft, and then a flash of light, and he blacked out, and they came and found him. And so, you know, most of those encounters, I don't know what to make. I have a hard time believing they're just beings from some other planet in the universe, and they're coming to hang out. You know what I mean? I feel like there's more to it than... you know, whether someone's a Christian and they think they're fallen angels or whatever people think, it just seems bizarre to me that, do you think that they're beings from other planets, these aliens that are showing up?
So I think that they're like both. They're probably transdimensional and interplanetary as well. But I think that probably means pretty close to the same thing when you get when we learn enough about the physics that interdimensional and interplanetary are probably not that different. So I think that they're both. That, you know, we're used to thinking of in terms of a linear space, but perhaps there's a way to bridge gaps by just, you know, folding space in a transdimensional way. And as we learn more, I believe that we'll understand what that means. But I guess I'm just talking off the top of my head right now. I'm not quite sure what to think.
Yeah, it is. It's scary. I think the unknown is terrifying, and those are definitely unknown. What's going on here? I guess really in any topic, you know, whether it's Bigfoot, whether it's Dogman, or these balls of light people are seeing in the forest, or demons and ghosts. Yeah, I think it's the unknown of not really knowing what to expect is almost more terrifying than if you knew everything about the topic. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. No, I always loved the idea of orbs, and I know you and Woody were involved in like researching that to a degree, or at least looking for them. And, you know, those to me are just incredibly amazing, and I can't get my head around quite what they are, you know?
Yeah, I can't either. You know, I think there's two different things. I think there's orbs and I think there's balls of light. You know, sometimes I'll watch these ghost videos and you'll see these orbs flying around. But what we saw really was a ball of light. You know, I filmed it and everything, but it was a ball of light. It really wasn't your traditional orb, what people talk about I'm assuming those are spirits, the orbs flying around. I'm sure no one really knows, but I mean, for the most part, that's what everyone assumes.
Right. Well, I've seen two of those with my own eyes in my lifetime. And, you know, when you see things online, there's so many people saying, oh, look at the orbs, look at the orbs. But most of those they're just lens flares. They're just, you know, the dynamics of lenses and lighting and cameras. And you know, I understand people are really trying to embrace the unknown, and that's comforting to them to think that, you know, when they get a lens flare, that it's a loved one being close by. And I don't mean to, you know, disparage that at all. I think that that's important and it's healing for a lot of people. But I with my own eyes, I saw the first time was, I suppose, about 20 years ago, and I was living back in Red Wing. It was in a house that my uncle had built. and I was living at the time with my wife. And I was sitting on the floor, and I used to smoke then. And I was sitting on the floor. It was a summer night, probably about 11 o'clock at night, 12 maybe. And I was sitting on the floor right in front of the couch watching the television. And all of a sudden, right in front of my face, this little yellow ball of light about the diameter of a quarter comes right in front of my face, drifting slowly. And it looks like a radiant little sun, for lack of a better term. And it was just about probably a foot away from my nose. It's just drifting right by me. And at the time, I didn't know anything about orbs. I had no idea, what the hell it could be. But I'm like, well, I wonder what that is. And it's just drifting by me and just slowly going past my left eye and then my nose and then my right eye. And then I'm like, hey, I bet I could grab that. And then I was like, should I grab it? And then I thought, no, I have no idea what the hell it is. I'm not going to grab it. And then after that, it just drifted right by and just disappeared. It was just this little ball of light. It was a yellow orb of light. And I for many years, I didn't know what it was that I saw. And as I got into the paranormal stuff, then I figured out, oh my God, I saw an orb. But this same house was also haunted. We had several occurrences there as well. It was an active house, and there's no reason that I can figure that it should have been, because the area that the house was built was not, it wasn't just, it wasn't the site of an old house that was demolished or anything like that. It was just prairie land that was acquired and developed into kind of a suburban kind of neighborhood. And it was a brand new house. So we were the first ones ever to live there. So I think sometimes either the land has a memory from way, way, way back when, or sometimes things just wander in. And this was one of those things, I think. But it looked just like a little sun about the size of a quarter drifting right in front of my eyes. And I've only seen one on one other occasion.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because that's a great way of describing it. Radiant like the sun. That's what we saw. The one that we saw and filmed was a little bit smaller than a basketball, though. But I have heard other people talk about the little ones flying around. What's the second time you saw one?
So the second time was about 6 months ago, and I just got up in the morning, and there's a little bit of activity in this house. Nothing really over the top, but sometimes things go on. And I honestly think, the idea is, like we were talking about, of being polarized. So I think when people have a certain energy field or whatever, these things will find those people. Like psychics are oftentimes just inundated with spirits coming to them in some form or another. So I figure I'm polarized because I do a paranormal show. So that must have given me a beacon of sorts. So I was getting up to get my coffee, and I get up really hard. I mean, I'm really dragging for about a good hour after I get up. But I got up and was wandering in the kitchen because I had to get the coffee. And as I entered the kitchen, right about a foot off the floor, came around the cupboard this little golden yellow ball again, and it was drifting right by, went right up around my feet and disappeared behind me.
Strange, man. That's strange.
I know, right?
I've never heard of anyone grabbing one.
No, I was close, but I didn't do it.
Wonder if something bad would happen if you did.
I know, that's the thing, and I kind of kick myself now because it feels like, even though I kind of felt like I shouldn't do it, I probably should have, just so I could say, this is what happens, Wes.
Yeah. Well, the last thing I want to talk to you about, and again, for the audience, check out the Paranormal Portal. It's on YouTube, 7 p.m. every night, Pacific Standard Time, Monday through Sunday. I don't know how you do it, man. Tell me about, I know you hadn't seen the creature, but there was an incident when you and your friend were out in the wilderness. Tell us about this.
Oh, yeah, this was when I was 14 or 15 years old, and I as I stated before, I grew up in southeastern Minnesota, right on the banks of the Mississippi River. But a friend of mine, I was 14, he was 15. That's about the age we were. I mean, it's really close. Either I was 13 and he was 14, or I was 14, he was 15. But we were up, and we would always hike up on the woods, up in the state forest that was near my home. And it's a beautiful place. It's butting up to several farms and stuff around, but it's this beautiful bluff that goes right next to the Mississippi into some really amazing scenic area. So we hiked up there, and we're up there on the top of the bluff for quite a while, and it was starting to get to the afternoon, and so we decided we were going to head down, and we were heading down this dry run. And if you're not familiar with what a dry run is well, at least my understanding of it was a ravine that was carved out over thousands of years just from spring melt off of the snow, and it just basically carved this dry stream creek bed. And we were coming down that and had gotten to this point about halfway down, and it's like a waterfall shelf. It's really amazingly beautiful, but we were just kind of sitting there, or actually just standing there, catching our breath and going to embark on the rest of the journey down. And as we stood there, suddenly this low, deep, god-awful growl happened right behind us. And I mean just by a matter of feet. It wasn't very far behind us at all. And I'm here to tell you that it is by far, I've said throughout this whole show, the paranormal doesn't freak me out. It didn't scare me at all. Whatever that was terrified me to the core. I was sitting there going, I have no idea what made that sound and is making that sound, but it is so big, I don't want to know what's about to kill me. I just could not bring myself to turn around. I just couldn't. And we stood there, and it was like I was frozen. And I just kind of whispered to my friend, what the hell is that? And he said, I don't know, but we need to get out of here. And we literally just both bolted at the same moment, running down this rocky ravine. And how we made it down there without killing ourselves, I have no idea. But it was just terrifying. And I got down, and for years, I had no idea what could make that noise. Because in this area of Minnesota, there's white-tailed deer. That's like the biggest thing out there. But something was there that was bigger that didn't fit, and it didn't sound like a bear. It didn't sound like anything that I'd ever heard. And it wasn't until the Jurassic Park movie came out, the first one, and that T-Rex growl. That was the first time I ever heard something that was close to that. And I got chills through my whole body. It was like, my God, that's kind of like what it was. But what was it? Because I know it wasn't a T-Rex. I mean, that just wasn't happening. But a little while after that, I started getting interested in Bigfoot. And as a kid, I was interested in Bigfoot. But as far as I knew, what Leonard Nimoy told me on In Search of was that he was in the Pacific Northwest. There was nothing like that anywhere else. It was just out there. So I had no idea what it was.
Yeah, you hear that a lot. Well, I hear that a lot. People like on the East Coast, they'll say, well, I didn't think it was Bigfoot because it's a Washington, Oregon, California problem. It's not a New York or Connecticut or Maine problem. It's your guys' problem. And it's like, no, they're pretty much everywhere. That's terrifying, man, especially when something growls at you, because if an animal's going to growl at you from a few feet away, it's going to attack. Especially if you guys take off running, it's going to attack. It's going to run you down most of the time. But what's weird with Sasquatch is they don't really seem to do that. I mean, sometimes they do, but for the most part, it's growling, people run, and then it's kind of over with. You know what I mean? Right.
Yeah, this was weird. And I had no idea. I suppose running was probably the stupidest thing we could have done. But it was the only thing that we could think of, because I was sure that if we stood there, we were going to die. I mean, it was just like that moment where it's fight or flight, and I knew that fighting was out of the question.
Yeah, what do you think Sasquatch is, Brent? What's your opinion?
I'm almost convinced that well, I mean, clearly there are so many variations and such, and this is something that you and I talked about, but I think that I don't think they're an ape. I don't. I think that they're just some relic hominid that's still out there and has managed to get by being smarter than us in the woods. I don't think it's an animal. I don't think that it's a man by our definition, but I think he's pretty closely related.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. There's moments to where I'll think it's an animal. There's other moments where I'll think it's more than an animal. And then there's moments where I'll think it's something interdimensional. It's something that, isn't really physical. And then the following week I'll be like, oh yeah, it's physical. It's because you hear so many different things. And the more you get into this, I think you start to realize, if you're intelligent, you start to realize you don't know anything about the subject. I mean, you get pulled in different directions, and it seems like the more you get into it, the weirder it gets. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do, and I think that that's true for all of the paranormal. And I suppose, there's no reason that the cryptid field wouldn't be the same. But it just occurs to me that there's some of those reports out there are just, it's so ape-like. It just looks like a big ape, and then others are, God, it look just like a person, just with a lot of hair. And so I don't know, other than the types, how to explain that is maybe there's different versions of that bloodline around, and because it's hard to believe that they're all seeing the exact same thing, but coming up with just such variations on what they're seeing.
Yeah, and then a lot of times you'll hear where they growl and throw stuff at you, throw rocks, and then you'll hear other encounters to where it seems like they're talking in some sort of weird language. And so it's kind of, it's one of those subjects that pulls you in different directions constantly, and there's so much to it, you know what I mean? That's why there's no real quick answer, even though I asked for a quick answer. There's really no quick answer on what Sasquatch is, because it can go many different ways. You know what I mean? It's one of the few things that can go different ways. A dog is a dog, a cat is a cat, a monkey is a monkey. Sasquatch, on the other hand, man, it seems like it goes in different directions.
But then, you think about human beings, and I mean, I've met human beings that are animals, and I've met human beings that are intelligent and articulate. So maybe that same spectrum can be afforded to them too. Yeah,
great point. Great point. Well, I enjoyed having you on, Brent. And for the audience out there, check out the Paranormal Portal. It's on Facebook, YouTube, every night, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I don't think Brent's ever missed a show. You can go in there, chat, and listen to different paranormal encounters. Sometimes Brent has guests on. It's a cool show. I'm a fan of it. And it was an honor having you on, Brent. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your own personal experiences.
Well, brother, thank you. And it's just been a huge thrill for me. I can't tell you how honored I am to be here.
The honor was mine. Thanks again, Brent. And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. We'll close out tonight with a band from the UK called Fabric, and the name of the song is called Black Lake. Until next time, everyone.
Intoxicating danger I like. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black lake. Let me float away. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black lake. Beauty is a black lake, let me sail away. Beauty is a black lake, let me sail away. Darkness approaching, deep water keeps flowing. It inhales me in the stormy tide. Endless emotion, a dawn thought, a notion, an epiphany brings the shore to lie. Save me from myself, let me drown